Hello and welcome, friends. My name is Lynn, and this is part 2 of my set of KCC 21 cards featuring the Not Too Shabby Shop Paper Pad Club, specifically the Squeeze the Day paper pad, which is the one that has a coordinating ephemera pack. So initially I was going to leave this video in real time, but it ended up being an hour and a half long, and my first video in this series where I show you how I pick my papers and cut those first 6 sheets of 6x6 pattern paper, that was over an hour long as well. So I thought I would speed this up, but still try to talk through and give you my thoughts on how I approach completing a set of 15 cards following the Kendra's card challenge, and we are up to challenge number 21. So I already have all of my papers cut. I have them organized in these cello bags 1 through 15, and in this step what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring out some more pattern papers from the Squeeze the Day paper pad. I'm going to maybe bring out some solid color cardstocks as well. And what I want to do is actually cut all the mats and layers for each of the 15 cards. That way, when I actually go to assemble the cards, I'll have everything that I need, minus the focal image and sentiment. And then what I want to do is I've pulled out my palette scout because this is my favorite way of creating a color palette. The Squeeze the Day paper pad, it's very, it's really just 2 colors, green and yellow, and I thought that it might be nice to create a palette that stretches a little bit beyond the paper pad. And it does look like the paper pad is following an analogous color combination, so I'm gonna roll with that because that's the only one that features this color green and also includes yellow. And you can see that they do have some of that darker green as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the analogous, because that does seem to be where this paper pad has landed. And I'm going to pull out those 3 colors. And what I do is I just look for the color and the shape. So I'm looking for a green triangle and a yellow square, and I'm just going to pull out all of the green triangle cards and all of the yellow square cards. I don't even really bother learning the names because the names that Palette Scout has assigned to these, it's really it does make a little bit of sense, but they are pretty atypical names. Mostly it's a functional way of labeling the colors so that if you just alphabetize all of these cards, you'll have them in correct rainbow order. Now, if you've never seen me craft with the Palette Scout, I've done tutorials. I even have a masterclass on how to use the Palette Scout. So do feel free to check out my playlist and check out that masterclass if you would like. But at this phase, basically what I'm looking to do is just pick a range of colors, because when you look at this paper pad, a lot of the papers are sort of in that mid-tone. You don't see too many that are really light. You don't see too many that are really dark. So what I want to do in my paper choices is I want to bring some darker colors in, because when you have a lot of contrast between light and dark, that's where the colors really start to pop. So see how I put that dark green in between that mid-tone green and the mid-tone yellow? Now both of them shine a little bit more than they did when they were right next to each other. And it really does seem like this paper pad is really spot on with this analogous color palette. All of the color combination suggestions from the Palette Scout, they are rooted in color theory. But what I like about using it is that you don't really necessarily need to know those rules to be able to use it. Now, when I've created just what looks good to my eyes. I like to use the value cards from the toolkit and use it as a little bit of a verification, a little double check to see that I have a nice range of value. These color cards, they are numbered from 1 to 5, where 1 is the darkest and 5 is the lightest, but surprisingly, the numbers don't always really correlate to, this grayscale. The yellow card and the green card that I just put down, those are both number 3, but they're actually the second lightest gray. So what I want to do is kind of spread this out a little bit, maybe find a yellow that's in these somewhat darker shades of gray. And so I'm going to pull out something that kind of looks a little bit pleasing to the eye and might complement this palette. Now, there's no getting away from the fact that I'm going to be using that yellow. So the yellow will be part of this color palette because I'm using so much of the pattern paper. But I really just want to pull in some of these extra colors, namely the darker colors and the super light color, so that I have a nice range. Because really, I feel like the paper pad is just those first two, the number 3 yellow and the number 3 green. And so by having this wider range of colored cardstock, I can really hopefully make some of those most pattern papers really shine a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to gather some solid color cardstocks. I might not have exact matches to these, but I'm just going to try to find what I can that is a close match. And if you did take my Palette Scout Masterclass, I kind of showed how I like to swatch all of my solid color cardstocks and even put them on swatch cards that directly map to the Palette Scout cards. That way it's really easy for me to just find the colors that I want. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go sketch by sketch from 1 to 15, and I am going to just pull out some additional mats and layers so that I can have everything that I need when I go to actually assemble the card. So just having this little bit of planning, thinking ahead a little bit, and gathering my supplies, I feel will make the actual card assembly go a lot faster. So what I'm going to do is I like to look for a combination of beautiful pattern papers, and what I did initially when I first picked that set of 6x6 pattern papers, I talk you through my process for how I picked those. And there's a lot left over from the paper pad because we get 24 sheets in a paper pad, and I've only pulled out 6 to use and cut. So I'm just going to continue to use some more pattern papers. But what I'm going to do is cut down some solid color cardstock so that I can really frame some of these papers and also have a little bit of a border around all of this pattern. Usually when I'm using multiple patterns on a single card, I like to clearly define the borders so that you can really, each pattern sort of offset from one another, and especially since a lot of the patterns in this paper pad, they're very similar in value, meaning from light to dark value. So they can very easily start to just blend one right into another if you don't have any borders, anything that really helps them to, stand apart from one another. And so mostly I'm using my solid color cardstock as mats and layers. And as I look at each sketch, I just kind of think about what I might like to see. And for example, with these half circles here, I want to put that on top of more pattern paper. And even though the sketch doesn't show it, I know that it's going to need a larger circle to go behind each of those half circles in order for you to be able to actually see one pattern off of the other because I chose to put some more pattern paper behind those circles. So when you look at the sketch where you see white, grays, blacks, you can choose whatever you would like. In this case, I'm going to be using a combination of even more pattern papers and then using some solid color cardstock to differentiate. So you can see I'm looking for some more pattern paper to set this particular pattern against. And there's so many patterns that are very similar to one another. So I'm always looking for some contrast. And a couple of things to keep in mind when you're looking for that sort of contrast: light, the value of it, light versus dark, the size of the pattern, so that really tiny polka dot pattern versus the larger, like a more medium size lemon pattern. All of those things really help to differentiate one pattern from the next. And this sketch is the one that I had the little bit of an oopsies. I miscut one of them. Not a problem. I'll deal with that when I put the card together. But for now, what I want is to create a matte layer behind this pattern so that when this gets assembled, you can really, it almost, just creates a border or a frame for it. And some cards will be pretty minimal. I won't need too much more than the just a couple of mats and layers. And some cards I like to add, a lot of extras. So it really just depends on the card and what I think might look nice. So for example, I've got this is sketch number 5 here, and I want to add a little bit of pattern paper as well, but you can see that once you put some of these patterns like directly on top of one another, super hard to distinguish one from another. So what I'm going to do on this card is there's a dark gray portion on the left and a lighter gray portion on the right. So I'm going to just cut a thinner sliver. So the section that has the lemon pattern, that will be on the right side so that it's thinner and there's less of it. And then on the left side, I'll use some of that dark, it ends up being like pine, I think is the color from Palette Scout. And that provides a lot of contrast. But I still kind of feel like this pattern paper gets a little bit lost on top of the lemon pattern. So I'm just going to put it on top of some of this cream color, and that will serve as a border. So now it really stands apart from those other patterns. And that's sort of what I want to think through in this step so that I have all of the pieces that I need. And then basically when I go to do the assembly of these cards, which will be in my third and final video, I just really need to glue and pick my ephemera and my sentiment, which for me, choosing ephemera, especially if I'm collaging, that's going to take another chunk of creativity. So by approaching the challenge in these phases, I feel like for me, it's a lot easier than doing one card from beginning to end. Because with each of these phases, I'm basically kind of in the same mindset all the way through. And I feel like I can work faster when I get into that groove. So right now, I'm not even really thinking too hard about what focal image I want to put on to these cards. Are these going to be thank you cards? Are they going to be birthday cards? I'm not thinking about the sentiment. I'm not really thinking about anything other than how do I make this a complete card? Because when you've cut down your 6 sheets of 6x6 pattern papers, that only really gives you, one element on your card. And sometimes it's kind of minimal. Like for this one, I think it could be fun. You could arrange this stack in a lot of different ways, which I think could be really fun. But I'm going to try to follow the sketch as much as possible for this first set of KCC cards. So what I'm going to do is I am flipping to the back each of these strips, and then I'm just going to use a bit of washi and tape them together. Now when you flip to the back, make sure you put them in the correct order. I had it reversed, but that's easy enough because it's just washi. So now later when I go to actually make this card, it's going to be a little bit easier to just use those pieces as like a single unit. So putting washi behind there just makes it a little bit easier to juggle rather than having, all of these little strips. And so I'm gonna just continue. I have a neat idea for how to make this particular sketch really easy later. So that also like going through this process also helps me to think a little bit about how I'm gonna approach assembling the card also. And I find that helpful too. And that way I'm not sort of going between the mindset of, okay, just cutting down papers, figuring out how to layer these things, what order to glue things down in, and then doing the final focal image and collaging and sentiments and all of that. Like right now, it's a lot easier and faster for me to just make some really simple design choices, not have to think too hard or too much about so many things, and then leave some things for later. And it ultimately will take longer, I feel, until you have your first completed card because I'm doing everything in stages, but I think it will overall be quicker to finish the entire set. So if tackling 15 cards feels like it is a really big task, I would break it down into smaller chunks. And maybe for you, it feels faster and it feels better to finish each card one by one, because everybody, I think, gets encouraged in different ways. And for you, it might feel like it's going faster if you actually see completed cards and you see that progress of having something that's done. For me, that's not really the case. For me, I like to just get into the flow of doing one thing and doing it for all 15 cards. And I feel like it's a lot faster to stay in that one mindset than do what's called like context switching, where you kind of switch into like a different mindset in order to, achieve a different task. And a lot of times, switching context is, a little bit more taxing, kind of slows you down a lot. It's kind of why factory processes are the way they are, where each person is just doing their one task because they can repetitively kind of just do it over and over. And then once you get into that flow state, I feel like, at least for me, everything goes a little bit faster. I kind of feel like I get into a little bit of a groove. And so it's a little bit fun to for me to approach the challenge this way. And I feel like by the end, when I've done all of this prep work, the assembly process for me is just more enjoyable also, because I've kind of done all of, the hard work of measuring and cutting, maybe not all of the hard work. So sometimes what I do is when I'm putting some of the additional papers in, sometimes I just throw in a scrap or two, and I just figure, okay, I'm gonna need like a matte layer for a sentiment. So I'm not gonna figure out exactly what size I need. I'll just put some of that additional pattern paper in and cut it down to size when I need it. Kind of like how some of the sketches show that you need to die cut a circle out of your pattern paper. I'm not going to do that now either. I'll go ahead and do that when I go to assemble the cards. For me, I don't want to have to switch between my guillotine and paper trimmers and die cutting. And so I'll leave that part for later as well. But you can see that it's kind of, I can see a little bit of progress as I am putting, just the pieces together as a little bit of like a dry run or a little bit of an audition. And I feel like doing this upfront thinking kind of gets it all out of the way for me. So I've done a pretty good job of, I think, mostly sticking to the side of the paper that I initially chose to use as part of my 6x6, the first set of 6x6 pattern papers. But definitely in this phase of things, I'm also thinking about which side of paper I actually want to use. Like, do I want to use the back versus the front? And that is something I highly recommend, which is to use double-sided pattern papers so that when you get to, especially I'll talk it through a little bit on the last card, the 15th card. And here on this sketch number 14, I'm not even too sure what I'm going to do for those black stripes. So what I did was I just threw in a lot of different options, lots of little scraps that I could use, maybe some additional pattern papers that could be fun there. And I'll just do the final addition when I go to assemble the card. Now with sketch 15 here, now that's the side that those papers came, but one of them was cut vertically and the other one was cut horizontally, and I don't think they fit quite right. So I'm actually going to turn one of them to the back side. And so it's kind of nice at this point as I'm preparing things to also make those decisions. And then when I'm putting things back into the sleeve, I'm trying to put them in such a way that it's facing the way that I want it to look when I go to assemble the card, so that hopefully I actually remember. So that's another thing to maybe tackle during this phase where you're cutting down your additional mats and layers and borders and whatnot. And that way you can make some of your decisions up during this phase, and then when it comes to card assembly, that can be a little bit more hopefully straightforward. So that's my process. I've got all 15 cards assembled. Now normally if I was going to be doing a video, I would have everything prepared kind of to this point before I even turn on the camera to hit record. And part of one of the things that we want to do a little bit differently this year is to give a deeper look into our process. So let me know what you think about that in the description box below. I know that there are new people discovering KCC for the first time, all the time, and hopefully the challenge continues to grow and more new people get introduced to it. So the hope is that these videos where we take a deeper dive into our process can be helpful to people who have never played along with KCC, or maybe they're just looking for different ways to approach the challenge. Now in this final little cello bag here, I'm going to just tuck in the rest of the scraps, whatever left over from the solid color cardstocks that I pulled initially. And I did pretty good actually. I got, I think a really lovely color palette range here. I think that's well represented in my cards, and I've got some scraps left over. So if I need to reach for something extra, I'll have that to dive into or dig into when I go to do the final assembly. So that's a look at my prep for what will be the final part of this series, actually putting these cards together. So stay tuned for that video. The best way to find out when that comes out is to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so that you can get an alert whenever I post new videos to my channel. Thanks so much for checking out this video, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.